Hey everybody, Big T here, and after a long time I'm finally making a kind of real video. As with most things, I'm late to this party by quite a long shot. I mean, it isn't the end of June yet, but still, I'm late to the party with this one. But I wanted to make a video for GPU June. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about the GeForce FX 5200 Ultra, why it's such a weird misfit card, and why I like it. So sit back and enjoy. So here we have the FX 5200 Ultra and all of its goodness. This one is open box, but basically new. You can see it's really cool. You can get a game and stuff. So this was point of view. I believe they were mainly in Europe. This particular unit came all the way from Poland. It's actually my second one. The seller sent me one that he claims was working, and the first time around, well, it did not go well. It was broken, had bad VRAM. But anyways, this card, last I tested it, it works completely fine. Take a look at the box here. There's not a whole lot going on, just different images and stuff. So yeah, what do you get when you spent your $150 or so to get a GeForce FX 5200 Ultra in 2003? Well, talk more about the details later. But in terms of what you get in the box, at least from a point of view, the first thing you'll notice is the card itself. But we'll come back to that. What else do we have in here? Let's see. Open this up. We get some drivers, it seems. It doesn't seem like it tells us on the CD anyways what version of the Nvidia drivers we're getting. So here we have Cyberlink. Part of me wants to cover this key, part of me doesn't really care that much. I mean, I'm probably never going to use this, so. But yeah, Cyberlink Power DVD XP. System requirements, Windows 98 SE, 64 megabytes of RAM. So I wonder what this was, if this was a way to play DVDs or something. I don't know. Truth be told, I don't know. Here's the money shot right here, Tomb Raider. Angel of Darkness? Yeah, Angel of Darkness. I believe it comes in 2 CDs, so you have CD1 and CD2. Now, here's the problem with this game. It got terrible reviews at launch. Absolutely terrible. And I have not once ever been able to get this to work. I've never been able to get this game to work, ever. I've tried patches, I tried everything. Couldn't get it to work on Windows 98 SE. It just hung the system. And on Windows XP it just crashes as soon as I launch it. So that really sucks. I would have actually, I've never played Tomb Raider, and I was excited, but I guess that's not happening. You get your typical sort of kind of cables. So this is your, I believe, S-Video to composite. Typical of the time adapter. So, you know, I actually don't know why they included these, because this card, as we'll see in a minute, does have VGA, so maybe this was for a secondary monitor, because DVI wasn't so common back then as it is. Well, actually, these days it's not even common either. No one uses DVI. We use DisplayPort and HDMI. But anyways, this is some sort of video cable jack, RCA jack or something. I think this is for plugging into this, and then you plug this into a TV or something. I don't know. And then, whoops, that's about it. Man, I just love these boxes. Can you imagine a time when you could go out, spend $150 on a new graphics card, and get a full game as well? It's just unheard of these days. Usually you just get demos or nothing at all, or sometimes you'll get discount codes, like 25% off the latest greatest game that's like $100. That's pretty cool. I like that. Alright, so here's a look at the GPU itself. This is actually a very, very nice looking GPU. It is cheap. That's point of view. They're not like super high end, but it's a really nice looking card. I mean, you've got solid state capacitors. Well, I'm pretty sure that is common for the FX 5200 Ultra series. You've got these nice RAM heat sinks, and I mean, it is a generic design for the heatsink. I've seen this used on other, I think even GeForce 4s. I'm not sure about the RAM heatsinks. I mean, those might be generic, but it is a really nice, like, snazzy looking design. You have a gold solder mask with these gold cooling, I guess, like memory heat sinks and VGA cooler. It looks really slick. Personally, I'm a big fan of the way this card looks. Very, very nice execution from point of view. If we turn it over, we can see as well on the other side, we have smaller, but still existent memory heat sinks. Let me see if I can zoom in so you can see the name of that terrible eBay seller, K-Tech. I'm never buying from that guy again. And then if we have a look here, we can see the point of view branding. And it shows right there. If I can get this in focus, point of view FX 5200 Ultra. When I first got this card, there was actually no thermal compound on the memory heat sinks, so I'm not actually sure what the purpose of them was. I don't know if that was intentional from the factory or what, but there was no thermal compound on them. So I went ahead and added some thermal compound. There was also not that much thermal compound on the core itself. So I went ahead and I fixed that. It's got some nice Arctic Silver 5 on top and bottom of the memory chips as well as the core. So this graphics card is good to go. And one thing you might notice with this card, absolutely ridiculous, is right over here. Check this out. An external power connector, Molex. This thing actually uses external power, which just blows my mind. So with the compliments done and over with, let's talk about the elephant or elephants in the room when it comes to this card. I'm talking about its purpose, its competition, and how it fares against the cards that it was designed to compete against. So yes, where things start to get really weird for this graphics card is when we talk about the Radeon 9200 series and the FX 5600 series, and for that matter the FX 5500 series. So with the FX series of cards, Nvidia was trying to give DirectX 9 to everybody. I mean, this is kind of mentioned everywhere and very common knowledge. Even the FX 5200 64-bit, the worst of the worst, had DirectX 9. Was it useful? No, not at all. But that was their goal, DirectX 9 for everybody. I guess you could think in a way that was kind of like future-proofing. I'm not sure. But anyways, the FX series of cards, I don't need to go through the history of them too much. There's tons of amazing videos on that. I would never be able to talk about it and do it enough justice, but they performed pretty decent with DirectX 8 games, but when it came to DirectX 9 they fell very short. But basically the FX 5200 Ultra was kind of a it didn't really have competition, because it was competing against ATI's entry level, which is the 9200 and the 9000 series. This is actually a 9250, but minor details. But the thing is that Nvidia had DirectX 9 for their entry level, whereas ATI only had DirectX 8. So they actually had the advantage in this case. But that doesn't really mean a whole lot of anything, because these were substantially cheaper than these, and the 5200 Ultra in benchmarks at the time really did not leave much of a gap of performance between the 9000 Pro, which this isn't one, but a 9000 Pro and an FX 5200 Ultra. For the most part, the gap wasn't this big, it was more like this big, which is really pathetic. And things get even worse when we talk about the GeForce 4 series. The GeForce 4 Ti 4200 outperformed the 5200 Ultra, and I think every single test. And that's because the 5200 Ultra is wasting a bunch of its, I believe, memory bandwidth on uncompressed data, because there's no compression engine in this graphics card. The 5200 Ultra is wasting so much of its power on uncompressed data. So in most cases, you had this $150 graphics card that performed only marginally better than like the $90 or $100 counterpart. And then when things get even more weird is when we talk about the FX 5600. So this is a graphics card that needs no external power, has double the amount of RAM, even though it is the more hot, I forget what that RAM is called, but it's not BGA like it is on the 5200 Ultra. This does have a compression engine, so it's able to make more efficient use of the data that comes down to it. Not only that, but the 5200 Ultra uses the NV34 core, whereas the 5600 uses the NV31. And actually, the NV31 has more transistors than the broken down NV34, because it may be the same core as the 5800 Ultra, but obviously some things were cut so that we don't need the dust buster cooling. So you have a really interesting selection of cards that this GPU is kind of competing with, and it doesn't really make any sense at all. On paper, the performance is kind of like 7% lower than a 5600 Ultra. This is not an Ultra, but for this guy it's about like 7% lower than an Ultra. But once again, because of that lack of the compression engine, it falls way more behind, according to an AnandTech review from 2003. So as we mentioned, the initial retail of this is $149. Well, this guy was $169. And they perform about the same. So why on earth would you buy this card? It doesn't make any sense. Because this guy runs cooler, he's more efficient, he's more future-proof because he's got 256 megabytes of RAM. Now, mind you, the $169 price tag was for the 128 megabyte version. But it has the compression engine. Basically, when it comes to real-world performance, you'll see those two cards there are almost identical in performance. Yet this one has less memory, needs more power, runs hotter, and just overall is less future-proof because it doesn't have the compression engine, so it's wasting a ton of its power, as I keep saying, on uncompressed data. And it also has half the amount of RAM that this does, while both still being fully DirectX 9 compliant graphics cards. Either way, back then you were kind of a schmuck for going with Nvidia because they were just terrible. Really, the FX series, as you obviously know, is just a big flaw. But still, I love the FX 5200 Ultra. It's just such a silly card that has no business existing, has no purpose. This is why you can still find them in the box, because they have no business existing. I don't think really anybody bought this card because, yes, it did have the same feature set as the 5800 Ultra, but at what cost? Everything runs really poorly on this graphics card. So really, to sum it up, if you wanted to be able to tell someone, I have the same feature set as the FX 5800 Ultra, then you could have bought an FX 5200 Ultra. But you wouldn't have been the wisest man to do it. Even if you wanted to stay as an Nvidia fanboy, it probably would have been better to go with the FX 5600 because it was just overall a better card for a couple dollars more. And if you were a smart man, you would have just bought a 9500 Pro for I think like $190, which ran circles around these cards, was far more future-proof, and just proved to be a better execution, rather, of a DirectX 9 card than the FX series. So I can blabber about how much I love this graphics card and how silly it is, but now I have to prove to you that, really, there's not much of a difference between this card and this card. One thing that I just want to mention really quickly, again, is that unfortunately I don't have a Radeon 9200 or a 9000 Pro to compare against. So we're just going to be comparing the FX 5600 to the 5200 Ultra, but it should really help highlight just how pointless the 5200 Ultra is. You have to keep in mind that the 5200 Ultra was meant to compare against the 9200 Pro, I believe, the 9000 Pro, and there was one other card from ATI. And although Nvidia had the upper hand with their DirectX 9 support, it was truly terrible. And like I said, in most cases, when you look at the review graphs, or the review benchmarks from back in the day, the 5200 Ultra has this much of a lead on the 9000 Pro. It's truly pathetic. So our testing environment is a Core 2 Extreme X6800 at 3.2 GHz, 2 GB of DDR2 667 RAM. We've got an ASRock 4-core dual SATA 2 motherboard, pretty common motherboard. And our tests are being run at 1024 by 768, as this is the target resolution you would have wanted to hit with these particular graphics cards. Anything above that, and well, you probably would have wanted a 5800 Ultra or a 9700 Pro. So without further ado, let's get into the benchmarks. So unfortunately I couldn't get 3D Mark 2003 to run, But I guess that's okay because I would like to compare DirectX 8 performance, and I believe 3D Mark 2001 is DirectX 8. So, looking at the FX 5600, we see that it scores 8,992 3D marks, which is, I guess, that's alright. That's not too bad. And then we come on over to the 5200 Ultra, coming in at 9,199 3D marks. So we can see that synthetically it is a little bit better than the 5600, but when we get to real world performance in games, you're going to see that much like the 3D Mark difference, it's not really that different. So starting things off with Call of Duty, the original Call of Duty, both cards pushed out very respectable frame rate. These are maximum settings, every setting cranked all the way up. So that's really respectable, but the difference is just so small. I mean, you could argue that the average is 10 frames higher on the 5200 Ultra, but maybe it was just the gameplay. Maybe I was doing stuff that was a little bit more harsh when I was using the 5600 Ultra. I don't know, but either way, these cards are neck and neck when it comes to this game. Next up is Midnight Club 2. Unfortunately, no VSync options here, so we're stuck with VSync on. As you can tell right away, they're basically identical. The min is a little bit harsher on the 5600, but it's really not any better on the 5200 Ultra. These cards are basically about the same in terms of performance with this game. Next up, Need for Speed Underground 1. Unfortunately, we're stuck with VSync here as well. Not all the settings are maxed out either. I will post the configuration somewhere in the video, don't know where. But interestingly enough, despite having a higher average on the 5200 Ultra, the 5600 had a better min. Maybe it was the gameplay, I'm not too sure. But either way, once again, you see the recurring theme. These cards are basically neck and neck with each other. We're going to end things off with the UT 2003 benchmarking tool. As you can see, the results are very weird here already. I mean, just look at this. The 5600 gets 115 average on the flyby, and the 5200 Ultra gets 101 on the flyby. Very, very interesting. I'm not too sure why that is, but I have a feeling that the 5200 Ultra, despite being able to hit much better high, well, not much better, but better highs than the 5600, it can't keep them. So it's actually kind of, maybe this is not the right word to use, but sort of unstable in that regard, that it can't keep that high frame rate. So really at the end of the day, those are both still really decent numbers. Like a 5 or 4 FPS difference is really not that big, but when it comes down to it, these two cards, the 5600 and the 5200 Ultra, they're almost the same. Hopefully this little benchmarking segment highlights just how weird this 5200 Ultra is. I mean, it performs almost identically to a 5600, and those two cards came out at the same time, I believe. So it just didn't make any sense to buy the 5200 Ultra. For a couple of dollars more, you would have gotten a much better, more efficient graphics card that didn't even need an external Molex connector. So it uses far less power and it just runs cooler. But either way, I think this is why I love the 5200 Ultra, because it's such a ridiculous card. It has no business existing. It's just silly. The memory heat sinks and the cooling setup is, well, maybe not for the core, but definitely for the memory, it's overkill. The fact that it has an external Molex connector to drive the power for this thing, it kills me every time. It's hilarious. But it's just such a weird and unique graphics card, and I think this is why I really, really like this card. I actually have two of them, as you can see. That's how much I like them. The Gainward card actually has a 10 megahertz overclock on the core and the RAM. Not that that really helps with anything, but either way, these cards are misfits, and for that reason, I absolutely love them. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. I know it wasn't as good as the other ones, but maybe we'll get back into the swing of things and start creating some decent videos again. So this is my entry for GPU June. Big T signing out. See ya.